Welcome back to the Bearded Console Gamer and to the weekly update, wherein I run through the choicest pieces of video game news from the last 7 days for your auditory and visual pleasure. Today we'll be covering a range of news, including the announcement that there's a brand new Star Wars game in development from Ubisoft, and we'll touch on the implications there in terms of the existing EA exclusivity deal with Disney. We'll also be talking about the reveal of a new Indiana Jones title, which is in the works from Bethesda studio Machine Games, along with some Nintendo and Resident Evil news, and of course, with it being 2020 Part 2, I'll also be bringing you up to date on the latest delays to hit the industry. And we'll start with the crushing, if not unexpected news that open world action RPG Hogwarts Legacy is going to miss its 2021 launch target and will instead be releasing no earlier than 2022. Hogwarts Legacy was first revealed during the PlayStation 5 event back in September, but will also be coming to Xbox consoles and PC. Little is known about the game so far, other than the fact that it's set in the 1800s and it'll let you live out your childhood dreams of going to wizarding school and doing everything in the GD Wizarding book. The delay was announced on Twitter on January 13th and reads a little something like this. We would like to thank fans from around the world on the tremendous reaction to the announcement of Hogwarts Legacy from our Portkey Games label. Creating the best possible experience for all of the Wizarding World and gaming fans is paramount to us, so we are giving the game the time that it needs. Hogwarts Legacy will be released in 2022. Well, ain't that just a kick in the quaffle? This week also gave us an update on Cyberpunk 2077, which came in the form of an apology video from CD Projekt Red co-founder Marcin Nowinski regarding the woeful state of the game at launch on base Xbox and PS4. During the 5-minute self-pity parade, we were told to expect regular minor and major patches geared towards fixing the crashes and bugs currently experienced by players. The first update is set to launch in the next 7 days, and that'll be followed by a larger patch in the coming weeks. Owinski also highlighted that the overall plans to support the game in terms of DLC hadn't changed, but also that the priority was now in fixing the game rather than pushing out that DLC soon after launch. We were also told that the next-gen upgrades for the PS5 and Xbox Series consoles can be expected in the second half of this year. So if you're anything like me, you're going to be waiting until then to pick it up and actually see what Night City has to offer. And now on to one of the major news stories of the week. Disney has entered into an official partnership with Ubisoft Massive to develop a new open-world Star Wars game. Now this has far-reaching implications regarding the amount and types of Star Wars games that we can expect to see cropping up over the coming years. First, let's get a little bit of history. Back in 2013, EA signed an exclusivity deal with Disney that effectively gave it a complete monopoly in terms of the development of games connected to the Star Wars franchise. This was an absolute coup for EA, but frankly it hasn't been great for the fans, as EA hasn't made the most of the IP, and the deal has also led to an inevitable bottleneck in the amount of Star Wars games being produced year on year. I mean, it's like giving a single author the sole rights to the entire Star Wars literary franchise. There's too much potential content there for one author to be able to handle, both in terms of volume and diversity of content. But I'm not saying that the exclusivity deal with EA hasn't yielded some amazing games. Squadrons, which dropped in October last year, was a great game. Even Battlefront 2, which was squirted into the world dripping with microtransactions geared towards milking every conceivable penny out of the player, was turned around in time to be a genuinely enjoyable game which I still return to today. Hell, Jedi Fallen Order was outright phenomenal. It took inspiration from Souls-like titles to create a challenging and rewarding core gameplay experience, featuring superb combat and traversal mechanics that were structured with excellent level design, an engaging story, and some great voice acting. By the way, Fallen Order just got a next-gen upgrade that lets it run on Xbox Series X at 60 frames per second with a dynamic resolution in the range of 1080 to 1440p in performance mode, or with a dynamic resolution ranging from 1512 to 2160p with a 4K post-processing resolution bump. It also now runs at 60 frames per second on the Series X and the PlayStation 5, with the Sony next-gen console also benefiting from improved post-processing, granting a higher resolution experience. It's also currently on Game Pass, so if you're already paying out for a membership and you haven't yet played the game, you've got no excuse, you've got to jump in there and experience it. But I'm getting distracted. The point is that whilst EA Studios are capable of making great Star Wars games, it makes little to no sense to make them the only ones who are allowed to make anything connected to the IP. Especially when the franchise has as many facets as it does, and when there are so many studios out there with different strengths who would be better suited to making specific kinds of Star Wars games. And just to be clear, we're still going to be getting the games that we love from EA, including a Jedi Fallen Order sequel and hopefully another good Battlefront title way down the line. But now on top of that, you're going to be getting a whole lot more. And that in turn is going to create more Star Wars history and even allow us to explore stories that occurred in the literature surrounding the franchise, that your average gamer will have no idea about. It could also be the first step towards returning to beloved series of the past like Rogue Squadron. But back to the newly announced title, there isn't really much that we know about it because it's still in the early stages of development. However, based on some recently published Ubisoft job listings, an official blog post from Ubisoft, and an interview between Disney, Ubisoft, and Wired, we do know some things. For example, the project is currently envisioned to be a story-driven open-world game, so I think it's safe to say that we can expect a fair amount of Assassin's Creed and Division formula to make itself known in the finished product. We also know that the game is going to be built using Ubisoft's in-house Snowdrop engine, and that it will feature an original story populated with characters new to the Star Wars universe. Disney's Sean Shoptaw summarised the new dynamic nicely in the Wired interview when he said, "EA has been and will continue to be a very strategic and important partner for us now and going forward, but we did feel like there's room for others." EA hates others. Moving on to the second huge piece of Disney news, the entertainment giant announced that it would also be partnering up with Bethesda Studio Machine Games, makers of Wolfenstein: The New Order, to develop an Indiana Jones title. Once again, we're looking at an entirely new story set in the indie universe rather than a retelling of one of the older movies. And the project is even going to have Todd Howard along as an executive producer. And if he screws this one up, he needs to be thrown into a pile of carnivorous ants like the Nazi in the Crystal Skull movie, which is the worst movie in the Indiana Jones series. As with the Star Wars game, not much is known, but the industrious word wizards over at IGN put together an article highlighting some of the details gleaned from the short reveal trailer. I won't go into all of the details here, but it looks like at least part of the game could be set in Rome, and more specifically in the Vatican City circa 1937, as evidenced by the date on the plane ticket and the map lying on the table. He'll likely be heading there on a secret mission while outwardly conducting business as a professor of archaeology, as he did in the films. Indy has also marked specific locations on the map, including the Vatican Apostolic Library, which means that the historical location is almost guaranteed a good looting when the game launches a few years from now. The most revealing thing about the date here is the identity, the potential antagonists that Indy is going to be angrily whipping through the sacred sites of Rome. And folks, it's gonna be fascists. Indy hates them, and around that time there were just so many. Side note, there's also too many now, but back then Hitler and Mussolini were both in power, being awful. So you can bet that the behatted Crusader is going to be going up against those jackboot wearing monsters in the new game. And with Machine Games' propensity for finding brutal imaginative ways of murdering Nazis, you just know that it's going to be fun, and hopefully graphic. The date also tells us that the story is going to be set between Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade, two movies that are infinitely better than The Crystal Skull. Spielberg, what were you thinking? If you want a comprehensive look at all the Easter eggs contained in the new trailer, head over to IGN and check out that article for yourself. But one of the biggest questions looming over the new announcement is whether or not the title is going to be an Xbox exclusive. Bethesda's parent company ZeniMax Media was acquired by Microsoft last year, and as of yet, there are no concrete indications as to how Phil Spencer is going to approach the question of console exclusivity. In short, it's up in the air. Phil's going to have to balance the option of strengthening the catalogue of Xbox exclusive games versus the mouth-watering amount of money that could be made selling the game on Sony platforms. Of course, Microsoft could always have the best of both worlds and make it a timed exclusive. Regardless, it's sure to be a launch game on Xbox Game Pass on day one, so good news for Xbox fans there. Next up, we have the news that Universal Studios Japan has delayed the opening of its Super Nintendo World theme park. The announcement comes as a result of the state of emergency that's been declared in the Osaka prefecture, where the park is located, as a result of the ongoing pandemic. The most recent opening date that the park had been set for February 4th, but it's now been suspended indefinitely, which means that the powers that be have no concrete idea as to when the emergency situation may abate. But we can probably expect to hear something when the current state of emergency elapses. Moving to the lighter side of Nintendo news, this week saw the reveal of a new Mario Edition Switch, which, unlike the vast majority of Special Edition Switches I've seen, maybe all of them, has a complete block color body. The actual unit itself upon which you play the games is completely red, and I think it looks beautiful, with the exception of the kickstand, which for some reason is always black. That bad boy comes with some nice red matte Joy-Cons and a beautiful blue and red carry case. We also got some new gameplay for the Super Mario 3D World expansion Bowser's Fury, which revealed a slew of features and gave us a look at a giant daddy kaiju Bowser, so check out the full trailer if you want to see the details for yourself. The final piece of Nintendo news for you today is that Pokémon Snap now has an official release date of April 30th. Now, my young dumbass was too stupid to play the original 1999 installment of the game, as I had recently become aware of girls. This time round, I'm looking forward to seeing what the fuss is all about. Moving away from Nintendo and onto something decidedly grittier, Capcom have announced that they will be holding a Resident Evil showcase that'll be kicking off at 2 PM PST on January 21st and will be hosted by none other than Brittany Bombacker of What's Good Games fame. We can expect more details on the upcoming title Resident Evil Village, including a new trailer and the very first nugget of gameplay footage, along with some details on some other Resident Evil projects that are in the works. Hopefully somewhere along the way we're going to find out something about this very tall woman who seems to have the entirety of the internet very fucking horny. And the final news bite, because my lawyers told me that I shouldn't end a video with the phrase very fucking horny, is the announcement that fans of Space Sim Elite Dangerous are going to have to wait a little bit longer for their Odyssey expansion, which is going to allow players to disembark from their spaceships on foot for the first time since the game launched all the way back in 2014. The newly announced delays are of course a result of the COVID pandemic, and according to a press release put out by Frontier, the developers of Elite Dangerous, it's going to affect console players more than their PC brethren. PC players can expect to have alpha access to the expansion in the early stages of spring and a full release in late spring, while console gamers are going to have the full Odyssey expansion at a later date in autumn. And that's it for the weekly update. Let me know in the comments which studios you'd love to see given a Star Wars project to develop in this exciting new post-EA exclusivity era, and whether there's any gaming news that I've skipped over and you'd love to see included in future roundups. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe and hit that notifications bell to stay up to date on future content.